Night of the Witches 1. Sojiro returned to his apartment on foot as per routine, under a blanket of clouds in the night sky. The rusty stairs of his apartment building clanged with each step. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the bicycles parked by the apartment building's outer wall. He debated the pros and cons of a bicycle, how much easier life would be versus the expense, the convenience versus the necessity, but in the end decided one was not right for him just now. Clutching the bag of apples under his arm, he took out the key to his residence.
あれば便利だけど、なくて。
He tilted his head in confusion. More and more he found himself preoccupied with such random thoughts, when the real issue at hand was decided what to do with the apples he had received. He placed the paper bag by the sink and switched on the lights. It was just after 10 in the evening. With the end-of-term exams just around the corner, he had come home an hour earlier than usual. As he made back for the kitchen to pick one of the apples to snack on, he found an envelope stuffed in his mail slot. The envelope had no name, return address, or stamp. Inside was a single piece of paper that had only the sender's name and a short message. It read,
話があるので、今夜どこそこのここに来られたし、大事なようなので、来るまでずっと待っている。言うまでもなく、
Oh my god, she's gonna confess. A concise set of orders, neatly written. It was signed Aoko Aozaki. She had been considerate enough to enclose a detailed map of the meeting place. Puzzled, he cocked his head to the side and then headed out the door. Afterward, upon the room's sole tenant leaving the premise, the envelope burst into flames and evaporated without a trace, as though it had never existed in the first place. He's in this apartment complex alone? Isn't that the dream? My god. By the late 80s, Japan's post-war economic boom had somewhat stabilized and the city experienced a period of steady growth. The city's modernization marched on, and the Japan Railway Station, a symbol of the new era, neared completion. In Misaki's neighboring town of Yashirogi, a new symbol of its own was about to be born. Yashirogi bred in Kitsuland. It was Misaki's worst investment. Years later, it would be dubbed the fool's gold of the economic bubble, a relic of a bygone age.
この町には夢とか遮奪さが足りない。
10 years ago. Yashirogi's renowned Tokitsu Baking Company ran factories all across the nation. Its proprietor was a middle-aged gentleman by the name of Yurihiko Tokitsu, known affectionately by most as the Toppan. He took it upon himself to begin development on an estate on the outskirts of Yashirogi and broke ground on a recreational wonderland that he hoped to see be the pride of Misaki City. The long-awaited opening came in 1981. After 3 years of investment, this local amusement park, full of all kinds of hopes and dreams, began a short-lived tenure. It covered more than 85 square acres. Its magnificent merry-go-round dazzled all who passed through the park's gates. Its roller coaster twisted and turned about the edges of the park like a rotting Japanese dragon. Its Ferris wheel, packed beyond necessity with gimmicks, was said to have tested the limits of modern engineering.
完璧だ。遊園地に必要なものは全て積み込んだ。
Oda Yurihiko looked upon his creation and smiled. Oh, welcome back. We're on chapter 5 now. Only boosting his confidence was the fact that its grand opening was staged during a period of prosperity, the springtime of the world. I'm doing good. But in spite of this, they splendidly miscalculated the balance between aspirations and sophistication. Its mascot, Kitty, was poorly designed and appeared like a cheap knockoff. The park was stuffed to the brim with bread stands. Even its impossible to navigate mirror maze seemed out of date from the start. I did not know that was happening. There are no dreams to be had at Kittyland, only nightmarish satire. Numerous trade magazines lambasted Kittyland's shortcomings and customer attendance declined. There was even an incident where a 6-year-old trade... Oh. Why is my... That was weird. 1986, 5 years later after the park opened, the situation had grown from bad to worse, and the park was hemorrhaging money. On top of everything, Yurihiko, who had bet everything on the success of the mascot Kitty, retired, and Kittyland's operations were officially in trouble. And thus, amidst the scorn of nearly all residents of the area, ended Misaki's one and only amusement park. What's more, perhaps best described as a footnote to this debacle, the Parisian... Parisian? Is that a nationality? Am I dumb? Parisian. Native residents or inhabitants of France. Of Paris, France, sorry. Parisian. Question, have you read Tsukihime? No. I mean, it's on my backlog to play, but I don't think it's on PC yet, right? So, no, this is my first Type Moon visual novel. Alright. Perhaps best described as a footnote to this debacle, the Parisian artist who designed the mascot, Toki Julich, was said to have snapped his brush in mourning over the closure of the park. Yeah, so... I mean, surely it's gonna come to PC eventually, right? If, you know... If Fate and if Mahoyo and Fate are on PC, then surely it'll get ported. Returning to the present. It was midnight, and the Kittyland of today was a shadow of its former glory. Like a doll abandoned at the corner of a toy box, the lonely park was illuminated only by the light of the town that continued to live around it.
なるほど。
So that's what happened. So this is the location they chose to meet up. Sojiro closed the Ashura guidebook that he had picked up on the way here. The story of its history was almost difficult to believe, but he supposed this was what people referred to as entropy. The park's front gate was unlocked. When he worked here the previous time, the iron fence was locked shut with a rusty chain, but the chain was nowhere to be seen. The gate left ajar. Following the map drawn in the letter, Sojiro quickly made his way inside.
急ぎのようなんだろうけど、こんな夜中に何なんだ一体。
Sojiro complained, quite out of character for him. It was probably because, in spite of his naivety, even he knew that something was amiss. Though the park was abandoned, this was still trespassing. Unlawful entry, larceny, burglary. These were certainly not things, or perhaps crimes, that Sojiro was proud to do, but...
すまない。お金は払えないんだ。ただで入って申し訳ない。
Money, apparently, was why his conscience was gnawing him. He clapped his hands in apology toward the statue of Kitty, on whose eyes the paint had begun to aptly dissolve. Sojiro passed the mascot, bleeding red paint from its eye sockets, and began to walk the night park. The building's colors has faded. The collection of machines was rusted. He's really concerned about paying. I mean, yeah, that's just how he is, I guess. The man-made residents no longer felt the passage of time. Even the ghosts themselves could not endure the disparity between this forsaken place and its previous grand stature. It was like a fossilized dream. These were the ruins of a paradise both created and abandoned by man and reality. The economy had stabilized, and the standard of living was on the rise. Nobody was overly concerned with the future. These were the remains of a wild and exciting area. His breath turning to white wisp before him, Sojiro continued through the abandoned amusement park. Though void of human presence, this was not nearly as frightening as the darkness deep in the mountains. City suburbs can take many different forms, but Kittyland was unusual for an amusement park in so much as it had been built adjacent to a residential district. The park was surrounded by a forest, but even that ultimately was man-made. It was no different from the curtains on the classroom window. If he were to scale the iron fence encircling Kittyland and break through the 20 yards of forested trees, he could make it back to the familiar townscape. Though the amusement park tended to arouse dread in the city folk, to Sojiro it was a little different from the commotion and terror downtown. Saving.
あれか。
The central plaza was as silent as a grave. According to the map, the meeting spot was west of here. Waiting for Sojiro at his destination was a rugged, imposing, magnificent castle towering before the backdrop of the cloudy night sky. Even for an abandoned park, it was a remarkable structure. If the roller coasters and the Ferris wheel were loud, intense attractions, this was comparatively quiet and easygoing. It was one of Kittyland's three iconic structures, and in a way, the wicked fortress that guided this paradise down the path of closure. Generally speaking, amusement park mazes generally fell into one of two categories. Labyrinths, which disorient visitors with their sheer size, and mirror houses, which disorient visitors with optical illusions. Many of a labyrinth's guests enjoyed the brief sense of adventure that it afforded. Over the years, however, it was usurped by the ever-increasing thrills of new attractions. Such was the way of all trends, the curse of fads. That is true. The new must give way to the newer. On the other hand, the House of Mirrors was a time-honored, beloved staple. Even with the confines of a classroom's dimensions, well-placed mirrors and a well-directed light could both perplex and delight its visitors. And figuring in the cost of maintenance, a well-designed House of Mirrors could far outlive its labyrinth brethren. Even if both types faded into obscurity, they would remain as a staple of what constituted an amusement park. However, that didn't mean much. That didn't mean that combining them would produce double the fun. Together, they transformed from entertainment into an uncanny realm from which those who dared to step within could never leave. In a similar sense, Kichi's mystery tour castle was the park's very own otherworld. Indeed, 5% of visitors ended up requesting staff assistance to get out. Modeled after European castles, it was greater than a football field in length, and the interior was further split into 3 floors. 2 floors above the ground and 1 below, lined with mirrors from top to bottom, equal parts complex and vast. The maze demanded at least 30 minutes even from veterans. One visit was all it took to be struck by hold on. Give me a second. Catotrophobia. Catotrophobia. Extreme irrational fear of mirrors. Huh. Right. One visit was all it took to be struck by catotrophobia. Jesus Christ. Catotrophobia for hours. It was this labyrinth that now stood in Sojiro's way. So the meeting place is inside it? Oh, I guess it's to prevent him from getting out of the bounded field. Yeah, that makes sense. Because they're trying to make a trap. It seemed that Sojiro, unaware of what a house of mirrors even was, concerned himself only with its lighting. He checked the letter from Aoko once more. The letter read, "I will be waiting in the first floor lobby of the House of Mirrors." That meeting place was definitely in here. There was something to see by at least, as he could just make out light faintly through the open doors. Putting aside his suspicions, he headed toward the entrance. The sound of his steps against the brick-laid path echoed faintly. He was far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The park's clocks no longer made tick nor talk. And the winter's bite no longer blew in the night. From within the silence, the stillness that would cause any onlooker to hold their breath. Sojiro stopped abruptly at the entrance to the House of Mirrors.
ところで青崎、そんなところで何してるんだ?
Is that picking up on my mic? There's like someone shooting guns or fireworks outside. I was like, is that from the music or something? But I was like, okay, yeah, there's something behind me. By the way, where are you over there? A sound rang out as if someone had dove behind a garbage can and it fell to the ground in their haste. A short silence ensued. For a moment, the abandoned park returned to its previous hush. Oh my god, what are they doing out there? Resigned to her having been exposed, the girl appeared from her hiding place.
Oh.
His voice died in his throat as he took in the sight of the girl's familiar face in unfamiliar attire. This Aoko, with her long hair flowing in the breeze, was different from the Aoko that Sojiro knew. The resolute stance and posture she took exuded the strength of her will. She stared directly at him with a sharp-eyed, piercing gaze. Her eyes were glowing with a dim, phosphoric light, enough to give Sojiro pause that he might be hallucinating. An icy coldness and the girl's strength. Sojiro lacked a sense of danger, but the sense of imbalance caused even him to feel the malice in the air. It was as though the Yukiono spirit of folklore had climbed out of from a ghost story and appeared here in reality.
Aozaki.
Instinctively, Sojiro took a step back. Surprised, he was starting to feel concerned. An unpleasant premonition rose to the surface, bringing with it a sense of anxiety. In spite of this, he felt obliged to honor urban etiquette by seeing if she was alright.
その顔を見るに何かあったのかと一応聞いておくんだけど。
Without acknowledging him, Aoko took a step forward. Her figure, this atmosphere, Sojiro found himself recalling a recent memory. He's recalling the night at the park. His twisted and knotted apprehension melted away and was replaced with the growing realization. She's the monster! The girl before him was very similar to someone he had seen before, that night in the park, though he had only seen her from behind. With increasing certainty causing him to swallow nervously, he noted that they might as well have been identical.
何をしていたかって話なら見ての通りよ。ここで獲物が通り過ぎるのを待ってたの。あなたが入ってから私も入って逃げ道をなくすつもりだったから。
Oh, he can escape now.
そうか、待ち合わせ場所は合ってたんだな。
Sojiro was mightily relieved he had not got the wrong place. It was unclear whether he felt confident about dealing with what was to come, or if he had simply failed to grasp the hopelessness of the situation. Aoko ignored his obtuse response and continued.
私はね、しずきくん。嫌いな人とか憎い人とかは人並みにいるんだ。ただちょっと変なのが敵になるやつの条件でね。
But he is. Cold emotion burned in her eyes. Her feet had already moved on one step closer to Sojiro. Sojiro's sense of foreboding was growing stronger. Wondering if what he had sensed was bloodlust, he retreated another step. Continuing as so, they maintained a distance of just 15 feet.
昔から私は嫌いな相手でも敵と思ったことはなかったの。でも逆に好きな相手を敵だと思うこともあった。理由は単純。
She hated them. She held her right arm out. The light about her was no illusion.
当たり前のことだけど、私は私の感情を乱すやつが敵なのよ。
Her arm moved again. It was instantaneous. Something shot past Sojiro in the blink of an eye, missing him by just a foot to his left. Before his eyes, a blue light, something akin to a fireball, had ignited from nothing. He finally understood what was happening.
ちょっと待った。今のは大変見覚えがある。
She ignored his dim-witted reaction.
外したか。
What is happening else? How the heck did she miss that shot? He was standing still only 15 feet away. A welcome mother to yourself. The fist-sized hole the blue light had made in the house of mirrors crackled and smoldered. A shot like that could easily cave in a human skull in addition to burning it to a crisp.
こんな射程で外すなんてアリスに見られたら自殺者ね。
That's what I'm saying.
でもこれで分かったでしょ。2度目だものね、あなたにとっては。
Sojiro backed away swiftly. Things were beyond incomprehensible. He was close to losing the ability to think at all. All he could make out was the figure of the dependable student council president, or at least what he had thought was the president, and the memories of the park that night 2 days ago. He had never experienced anything like this, though most people living in a civilized country would never have seen anything like it either. A lethal weapon that could kill with nothing more than the pull of a finger had a way of suspending the ability of its targets to determine between not just good and evil, but dreams and reality, past and future. And the more peaceful someone's life had been, the stronger that suspension was likely to be. All that one could think about was the fact that they were alive at the very moment. It was as if he was an unwritten character on a blank piece of white paper. There is no before, there is no after, there is only what came next. This was a very common thought process for anyone staring down the barrel of a gun.
あ、命乞いはやめてね。意味ないから。でも、恨み事ならご自由に。殺す側の義務として一言一句聞いてあげる。
By saying it was pointless, she made it sound more like she would not listen to what he had to say. However, Sojiro was in such a state of shock that it did not even enter his mind to speak up. All he knew, for reasons unknown, was that the girl in front of him wanted him dead.
嘘つきにも程がある。
But he doesn't know.
飛び丸のバカ。何がそんな生き物はいないだ。実際いるじゃないか、こんなお化けみたいなのが。
Sojiro felt that if he had said that out loud, the second blast would come even quicker than the last, so he kept it to himself. His mental expletives stirred his mind from paralysis to pure panic. This response came from not confidence, however. Oh. Someday, out of the blue, someone is going to kill me. While it may have seemed like a basic belief to hold.
でもそうだった。都会には殺人事件がある。ルールを破れば殺されるのは当たり前だってちゃんと教えてもらってた。
To Sojiro, the situation seemed to perfectly align with his inexperienced understanding that the city was a coldly pragmatic place. As far as he was concerned at this moment, being killed by a classmate was not something to be so surprised by. Yeah, though I feel like that's still pretty surprising. In a society where murder was possible, he was able to accept that this sort of situation was as natural. Of virtually no concern was the series of events. that led to Aoko's aggression toward him. The only thing that truly confused him was Aoko's blue fireball. Sojiro swallowed with an audible gulp. To anyone who may have been watching, it was the response of a victim paralyzed by fear.
そういうことよ。ようやく理解してくれたわね。多くは語らないけど、あなたにはここで死んでもらう。魔術は隠匿するものなんて言っても、そっちには関係のないことだし、単に運がなかったって思えばいいわ。大事なのは私があなたを殺したってことだけだから。
Done talking, Aoko once again lifted her right arm. There is a hum like a machine. Blue light began to revolve about her arm beneath her sleeve. This was taking longer than last time, leading Sojiro to believe that it was going to be much stronger than the attack that was still scorching the wall behind him. The realization caused his panic to heighten.
いやなんだつまり始末するとかしないとかあの夜のお化けは青崎だったとか都会は本当に込み入ってるとかそういうことじゃなくて
His thoughts became jumbled. His heart pounded like a hammer. This was no time to be standing still. He was not sure if the girl in front of him was really human, and more importantly, even if he could accept the events unfolding before him when all of this was said and done.
待て人殺しはいけないんだぞ
It's wrong to kill people. True. Even if it was the fact of life in city, Sojiro was not about to lie down and die.
分かってるわよそんなことは。
Did you guys know people die when they're killed? Sojiro's scream, still entirely oblivious, was the last thing to invoke Aoko's full wrath. Aoko fired a barrage of magical blue bullets. In an instant, Sojiro dashed into the shadows behind him, into the entrance to the House of Mirrors. Wait, that's like the worst place to run. He darted feverishly down the hall. After a mere few feet, he was left completely out of breath. This was due to the shock of seeing yet another attack, fiercer than the first, that he'd never seen in his life, and because he couldn't shake the thought that if he'd move even a second later, he would be dead. He could not afford to stop. Well, it's a good thing he's a good runner. The sound of merciless footsteps closed in behind him.
けど助かったここならなんとか
He threw everything into his legs as he sprinted. A straight, narrow passage about 60 feet long connected the entrance to the main lobby. At this rate, if he could just make it to the lobby, he was sure he would be able to find as many hiding spots as he needed.
助かった
He arrived in a large open space. This was the first floor lobby. There were 3 passageways. One led to the basement floor, one connected to the first floor maze, the other was a set of stairs leading to the second floor. Sojiro did not particularly care which one he chose, so trusting his intuition, he made a run for the first floor maze when... Ouch. He hit a mirror, probably. He smacked his head into a transparent wall.
鏡。
ええ、面倒だけどそれならフェアでしょ。追いかける方にも逃げる方にも有利不利がある。
A somehow cheerful voice echoed in his direction. There is no need for Sojiro to even turn around. In the very same mirror he had crashed into, he could see Aoko Aozaki's figure slowly approaching.
それと1階の奥にある出口は封鎖しといたから。結界じゃなくて物理的に。やりすぎて封鎖っていうより瓦礫？土砂崩れ？どっちでもいっか。とにかく下手に出口に近づくと崩落に巻き込まれるから。生き埋めが嫌なら近寄らないことね。
Panicked by the impending footsteps, Sojiro groped for the wall. He could see the stairs to the second floor. He did not understand what Aoko had meant earlier, but he at least knew that the first floor was not going to save him.
ま、私としてはそっちのが助かるけど。形式上、事故死の方が後始末とか楽だから。
Behind him was a creature beyond words. As she continued her idle taunting, she lifted her right arm even from her above her clothes, one could see some kind of strange, incongruous pounder upon her body. The veins beneath her skin. They made it seem as though something inhuman was circulating her body. Whether out of pity or repulsion. Sojiro stopped for just a moment. His pursuer evaded his gaze.
ああ、これ？普段は塗り薬で隠しているんだけど、今日は特別。魔術刻印って言ってね、魔術師の証みたいなものよ。ほら、光が回ってるでしょ？これがさっきのスナップ。わかりやすく言うと弾丸の元。今日は調子いいし、私魔力を効率よく使うのだけは自信あるし。うん、あと30回ぐらいかな、さっきみたいな奏者ができるのは。
Perhaps she was on an emotional high, for her voice had become frightfully friendly. The substance of the conversation could not have been any more unsettling, however.
そもそも何を言っているかよくわからないんだけど、青崎。
わからない？段数はあと30発ってこと。そこまで逃げ切ればあなたの勝ちよ。とりあえず今日のところはね。
今日はって明日もあるのかな。
Sojiro knit his brows. Aoko's expression creased into a scowl at his behavior. Although he was panicking, it seemed that deep down he still did not feel for the full weight of the crisis. She knew he still didn't get it.
宣言はしたわ。自由時間はこれでおしまい。まだ罵り足りないだろうけど、ま、その手の時間はキリがないしね。この辺りで諦めて。
It appeared Aoko had prepared this theatrical dialogue ahead of time. Not to allow her opponent time for futile pleading, but to give him the time to curse her, his killer. Such forthrightness was her modus operandi. With this victim, however, it was not going as she had hoped.
とにかくそういうことだから。じゃ、狩りの時間と行きましょうか。
Her voice was void of emotion, and her eyes ruthless as they bore into her prey. This time, Sojiro finally accepted that he was going to die. Silent as the dead, it stepped into the remnants of a dream that had long since seen no visitors. There is no wind this night, nor a soul to be seen. Still, it heard the echoes from within, clasped its hands together, and grinned. Its form, with hands clasped, resembled that of a budding tulip. The bearing of this artificial flower reflected in the cloudy mirror of the ticket attendant's office next to the gate. Here? Next to it stood a display board, corroded by years upon years of rust. Number of visitors today: 2. The board had graffiti crudely scrawled out atop one of the words. It was replaced with deaths. The records board had long fallen to disrepair. After taking a full 10 seconds to digest what it was looking at, it made its own revision. Who the fuck is that? After appending this number with an index finger, she smiled like a flower. Then she began to walk toward the source of the sound. It had been 10 minutes since this rhapsody had begun to echo from the mirrors of the House of Mirrors. The amusement park's entrance returned to it as it was before, soulless. In the end, it doesn't even matter. Even if Sojiro had been the luckiest man alive, there is no way he should have been able to escape. The question, however, was how much of this was by design, and how much was sheer coincidence. Even Aoko, who had made all the arrangements, had no answer. Indeed, there were only 3 things she could say. It was taking longer than expected. He was putting up more resistance than she had anticipated. And that choosing the House of Mirrors had been a mistake. I mean, what else would she have chose then? She had really screwed the pooch on this one. The location itself was an excellent choice, as the House of Mirrors was perfect as a hunting ground, but seeing her own incompetence reflected in the mirrors was beginning to grate on her. The moment Aoko's right arm began to glow, Sojiro made a beeline for the staircase in front of him. A strobing series of blue flashes lit the room behind him. The hunter calmly followed her prey, and the prey desperately ran for his life up the stairs. I think she's crazy, chat.
そうでなくっちゃお膳立てした甲斐がない。
In stark contrast to Sojiro's frenzied escape, Aoko walked briskly up the stairs. She elected not to run after her prey in order to maintain a set distance. As she lacked confidence in her accuracy, she would be the most challenged if Sojiro bull rushed her and went down fighting. but at a distance of 30 or so feet, he posed no threat. By the time her prey drew near, she could fire 10 shots and hit at least 4 of them. Their position just a moment ago hadn't been ideal. At this distance, in a space this open, there was a chance, however, that it could turn into a fistfight if he flanked and charged her. Zodra would never hit a girl. Currently, Aoko's best lesson was the bullets from her right arm. If he was going to capitalize on the advantage, it was in her best interest not to close that gap between them. If there is a good time to approach, it was only after her prey had become exhausted and had lost the will to continue. Would she pierce his leg, shoot him in the back? Or perhaps, would he just give up after losing himself in the labyrinth? The hunt would end when her target sustained some sort of injury and became unable to run. On Sojiro's end, he could barely bite back on screaming as he bolted through the maze. Even running in a straight line had become difficult, much less searching for an exit. Oh, another mirror. The corridor stretched out far before him, or so the mirrors blocking the path had made it seem. Panicked, he made a turn to the right. I think he might be cooked. Clutching his head in his right arm, Sojiro led with his left, groping through the air to see whether a wall was there or not. He dove down the hole to the left, narrowly dodging bullets, the bullets targeting his life. Urged on by the sound of approaching footsteps, he ran without thinking. That last one was close. A hair closer would have meant his life. He caught the odor of burnt hair from the back of his neck. He was very lucky. Or perhaps very unlucky. If he were actually lucky, he would not be in this situation in the first place. The second floor of the House of Mirrors was structured like a giant spiral. It wound left, starting from the outside wall. Eventually, it would lead to a dead end. The more he tried to escape, the more cornered he had become, as though he were trapped in a twisted guillotine. His stifled screams threatened to leak out as complaints. No matter what he did, he was going to be killed. All of his struggling merely served to prolong the inevitable. Yet he ran. No matter how many mirror walls he rammed himself into, he ran. Even after crashing so hard that his forehead bled and he saw stars, he ran. Pain shot through him at every turn. The more frantically he ran, the more intensely he smashed into the invisible walls. His body began to understand this rule and begged him not to run anymore. His breath was already ragged after sprinting a couple hundred feet. No matter how he thought about it, this was not normal. This was way too crazy. This was all just a bad joke. If he turned around now, she would apologize to him for taking it too far. His mind had gone blank. As his body continued to slam into mirrors again and again, his feet showed as they began to believe that perhaps it really was all a joke. But then, he felt a chill. Well, bye-bye. A touch of death upon his neck. Oh my god, I just realized it. The light. Ever since he had arrived in the city, he had come face to face with more than one or two near-death experiences. For someone who did not understand city life, his present predicament was not unlike when he experienced the traffic on the streets or the commuter rush on the station platform. He was far from an innocent babe unable to comprehend life or fear. Rather, everything he had ever known became irrelevant when he was flung into a completely different cultural sphere. Even society's promise of safety, something urbanites took for granted, were threats unknown. So he was used to this already. Though if he were to be honest, he was dissatisfied with some things. Things superfluous to necessity. This world was overflowing with valueless things, and they were all dangerous in some way. Even the everyday necessities sold at the convenience store were, as far as he was concerned, amazing tools. Civilization had raised the standard of living so high that it had numbed the humanity's sense of danger. The city's constant pursuit of wealth and convenience was a poison to a country boy like Sojiro, and he did not have the capacity to accept these conveniences. That it was possible for such conveniences to easily and suddenly be misused and cause unintended accidents had always made him anxious. Why? He had to wonder why he was even here. Why did he come to the city? He could have just stayed a country bound. How ironic. It took the real threat of death to finally make him realize, like a divine revelation, what he'd failed to understand until now. He'd always had to expect the unexpected. Near-death experiences were far more common than one might think. To begin with, safety was something that came at a price. Being alive meant that the opposite was always lurking around the corner. It was just like a street light at night. When the sun rose, its illumination would naturally disappear. Another barrage of strange projectiles was mercilessly by him. He recalled in the back of his mind the charred remains of someone at the hands of the blue flame 2 nights prior. Somehow, the situation reminded him of a horse being led by a dangling carrot. For now, he lifted his head and continued to run through the labyrinth. But for what purpose? Though he knew the pain in his chest was very real, he felt disconnected from it. The night sky was visible through the skylight was a muddy ultramarine, no longer resembling the one he knew. And managed to calm himself. Sojiro began to laugh in despair, as though something rather precious had been broken. Everything had become meaningless anyway. Even so, his legs somehow made their way forward at the sight of her reflection in the mirror. Chat, would you let Alco kill you? Like a game of cat and mouse, Sojiro fled through the labyrinth of mirrors. Then, after 4 minutes, that strangely unreal tension ended. The ninth shot of the blue light hit inches away from him. It exploded the moment it made impact, launching Sojiro into the opposite wall. Of all the fire he had taken thus far, this shot indisputably brought him the closest to death. No. Oh, okay, it's just me. Groaning, he collapsed to the floor. His back was on fire with pain. He was not bleeding, and was lucky he could even still scream. Yet, his body refused to move. Physically and mentally, he still had something to spare. The pain was not so bad that he couldn't get back up. He's gonna reveal whatever was hidden underneath the wrapping on his neck, and then he's gonna mog her. It was just that there was a skylight above him, and he could glimpse the dark of the night sky beyond. The feeling that overcame him was a raw, selfish bout of grief. Oh, it was just so cruel. To have to stare at that for the remainder of whatsoever short life he had left. Sojiro's ragged breath slowed. For all intents and purposes, he had given up. He had given up fleeing from the pursuing footsteps, and perhaps even the root of all of his problems.
まあ、青崎に殺されるならいいかな。
Sojiro Shizuki felt things that, in any other circumstance, he would never feel. Incidentally, without exaggeration or embellishment, this was the only mistake he had ever made in his entire life. Staring vacantly into the night sky above, Sojiro listened as the footsteps drew nearer.
Give up?
It was the closest her voice had ever been to him. Perhaps feeling that he had really given up, she approached his collapsed form. In the dark, mirror-lighted corridor, he could not make out her expression. Without a word, Sojiro raised his eyes to meet his murderer.
返事がないならそれでいいけど。調子狂うわ。普通どうして殺そうとするのかぐらい聞くものじゃない？
I mean, she kind of already explained that to him, though, didn't she? Alko spoke from within the shadows. Now that she had mentioned it, he realized that would have been the obvious question to ask. He had more or less picked up on the fact that he was being killed for learning some secret, but it was human nature to want to know more. Oh, okay, fair enough.
そっか。それはそうなるな。
A simple affirmation. His face was a mixture of resignation and a forlorn longing. He thought that for a moment before.
でも言う必要はない。聞きたくないんだ、そういうのは。
Sag. He responded in a mature, subdued voice. His response was clear, rather gallantly so.
そうじゃ殺すけど死ぬの怖くないの？
怖いに決まってる。何より痛そうだ。
His face turned wry as he objected, to which Aoko frowned. As nonchalant as he could be, he was honest about his feelings.
そりゃ怖いでしょ。私だって怖いと思うし。でも悪いわね。我慢して。人でなしと罵ってくれて結構よ。今の私は本当にその通りだから。そういった意味じゃあんたと同じ。普通の道徳がないのよ。だから必要なら人も殺せる。
Sojiro's finger twitched in response to her indifferent tone. As if to say that, despite having given up on just about everything, his body could not let those words slide.
人殺しなんて良くないぞ。
分かってるって言ってるでしょ。
Aoko raised her right hand. The light from the crest illuminated her face. It goes without saying that her expression was unchanged. She was not crying, nor was she smiling. She was a young woman who had excised her feelings. Deal with it was another thing Sojiro could not let slide. Sojiro could read on Aoko's face that she was not herself. She was in pain, and to a degree he had never seen in her. Oh.
すまない。ちょっといいかな。
何？ここまで悲壮感を盛り上げておいて、やっぱり逃げるなんてのは却下よ。
He unconsciously smiled at Aoko's ruthless counter and breathed a sigh of relief. He had misread the pain he saw in her face. This was the same Aoko. Sojiro laughed out loud in genuine joy, a laugh that most others would have taken as an insult.
遺言でも聞いてあげようと思った私が甘かった。っていうか、今の小バカにした笑いがあんたの遺言ってことで OK？
いや、そうじゃなくて、あそこにいる人は青崎の友人なのか？
It was that person from earlier. Out of nowhere, Sojiro pointed behind Aoko.
はあ
Aoko thought that it must have been that old, overused distraction technique. If this had been a Japanese comedy act, this would be the part where she gave him a whack with the paper fan, but after giving it a second thought, she realized Sojiro didn't have the capacity for understanding old or even new tricks.
あんた何言って。
Perhaps his honest disposition had been to his benefit. Without thinking, Aoko gave in to her curiosity and turned her gaze toward the direction in which his finger was pointed. It looks like a puppet. And there, Oh, what the fuck. Something that should have not been there in the maze. Something with a creaking wooden smile. It was the ominous, creepy, uncanny figure of a girl. An unusual figure with 2 arms and 2 legs stood silently in the darkness. It was only for a moment its beauty, which was even apparent from afar, told the insanity of the current situation. Extend. The utterly unknown threat made Alco freeze on the spot. Avoiding it didn't even occur to her. Humans possess intelligence and knowledge, but when confronted with the unknown, they fail to process what to do and... Oh no. A shriek escaped Alco's mouth. The magical attack crossed the 30-foot gap in an instant. The arm of the girl who had appeared at the rear of the corridor was slender and quick. It extended to a near impossible length, striking Alco from behind. Alco crashed into the wall as she fought back in anguished whimper. The attacker retracted her arm. The puppet saving him. Sojiro sprang to his feet. He darted to her side and used all the strength he could muster to get her to her feet. He could not believe how light she was. In Sojiro's mind, Alco was an extraordinary individual. He expected that if he were to ever touch her, it would be apparent that she was far stronger than he. But in reality, she was about as heavy as you would expect a 100-pound girl to feel. Meanwhile, that thing continued to reel in its arm, as if it were some sort of mechanism. Having ascended more than 30 feet from the elbow joint, it clanked as it returned to its previous shape and size. Alco tore her hand away from Sojiro's. Suddenly, she felt her knees buckle from under her, but Sojiro caught her before she could even hit the ground, and helped her to her... Don't... Okay, give me a second. He looked back at the eerie shadow 30 feet as it finished retracting its arm. Alco grabbed her lower back as she answered. A searing pain shot through her. What did the puppet do? Aoko tried to steady her breathing as she assessed the damage done to her back. The pain was quick to fade and her breathing returned to normal. For the time being, her motor functions were no longer hindered, which meant the real damage was elsewhere.
Oh, Aozaki, あれ
分かってるわ、黙ってて。
Blue light glowed across the gloom. The magical energy generated by her breathing was accumulating in her right arm. If magical energy was the fuel, the formula was the igniter. For Aoko, this was little more than a reenactment of 2 evenings ago. Next time the puppet extended its arm, Aoko would fire a magic bullet as fast as she could. A battle at approximately 30 feet. As long as Aoko could secure a 2-second window, she could create a counterattack to end their duel. It made its move. With its head tilted down, there is no expression to be seen, and in the darkness, its apparent age was impossible to make out. To the 2 humans, the puppet was not dissimilar to a faceless ghost. Its left arm slowly came up with a grinding sound. Wait, she has the same hair as her. I just realized. Its movements were dull, as if the joints were rusty. The right arm, which had been extended earlier, hung at its side. Though the puppet's mouth was hidden by its long locks, the sense was that it was smiling.
さっきと用途が違う。あれが本命。しずきくん、どいて。
She threw herself into Sojo and extended her hand. Its arm extended at that very moment. The timing was impeccable. In a single second, Aoko's snap bullet scored a direct hit on the puppet's arm, throwing off its trajectory and sending it crashing into the puppet's body with a violent explosion. Or at least, that is what would have happened had the magic formula been invoked. She barely avoided being struck once again. Whether her maid trap failed her, intuition took over and she managed to get away.
やられた。最初のはそういうことか。
She clenched her teeth in frustration, her thoughts racing a mile a minute. Fight or flight. It only had 1 arm left, which would take time to retract. This was the best shot Aoko had at defeating it. If she could evade the right arm just a fraction, she could get close enough to.
Vivo insum, solitaire putresque inferis. Fictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies, Teobeam.
A crackle echoed through the corridor. The poetic murmurs contained enough magical energy for a mage to perceive. The verse itself was Latin, but it contained hints of the language of curses, Gander. Hope you remember your Latin classes. Great. Originally, they were words meant to curse the hated adversary.
Mea animae mortalis, ote me futura negata sunt. 真似すん
My life is immortal.
I
Though
know
my
the
future was
Finland
destroyed, I
Venus.
am a ghost. The
Teo
definite
de
unlimited blade works.
conveniamus insomnio ipsum.
Surely that's what's happening. Curses beget curses. The victim calls down the curse on the assailant, creating a vicious cycle of negativity. The incantation was meant to do just that. However, this was ultimately a one-puppet show. An unprecedented source of power akin to auto-intoxication. As unbelievable as it seemed, the cycle of curses had been turned into a perpetual motion device.
何それ、レベル高すぎじゃない。
What? Aoko abandoned the idea of digging her heels in. It was time to flee with all due haste.
何してんの、あんたも来る。
What? I knew she was a tsundere. She grabbed Sojiro's hand and ran as fast as she could, deeper into the realm of mirrors. The crackling voice continued its murmuring behind them. But why did the puppet show up to the amusement park?
Proximi mich negligentis ferunt.
My neighbors
Omnes
neglected
nos
me.
peccantes
Not an
fins.
innocent among us. Among
Et
us.
omnes nos
We are all
egum
sinners.
fins.
We are all sinners. Welcome to my
Omnes nos
house. May we
peccatoris
die a
fins.
muddy death, from dust to dust.
Venit
Gouge out my heart.
Dominum. Lut simile somnium.
This is some edgy
Et
stuff.
ver simile quotidianum. Corprebo. Te judico.
Death be upon you. Aoko fought against the pain in her back as she ran through the mirrored corridor. She dragged Sojiro by the hand.
青崎、傷は。
別に背骨がしびれてる程度よ。内臓は平気だし、出血もないみたい。
She cursed inwardly at how much of a mess she felt, though. Unlike Sojiro, Aoko did not run into any transparent walls. Thanks not to superior sight, but rather preparation, she'd hammered the layout of the building into her memory.
平気ってわかるのか。
そりゃ自分の体だもの。身体管理は基礎中の基礎よ。
Aoko's matter-of-fact answer contrasted with Sojiro's nervous questioning. The corridor grew shorter with each and every turn. Left turn. At first, they were able to advance in the straight line for about 100 feet at a time. But by now, they were forced to turn a corner every 50 feet or so.
あいつはあの夜の。
多分ね、同じタイプだと思う。貴重なオートマタを惜しげもなく使い捨てるなんて、よっぽどお金持ちなんだろうけど。
But again, why is it going after her? Sojiro furrowed his brows. He was grateful that she was answering his questions, but baffled by the strange words she was using.
青崎ストップ。もう随分走ったぞ。あいつは曲がり角一つ分向こうだ。少し休もう。
His words suggested that he was still concerned about her injuries. Aoko shook her head in irritation.
あの距離を狙ってくる相手に通路一つ分のリードは無意味よ。せめて二つ分に行くまで走るの。
Sojiro nodded. With that matter settled, he asked.
なんで俺を連れて行ってるんだ。
逃げられたくないからじゃない、バ
idiot. Answering curtly, Aoko glared at her naive prey. Such a tsundere. The two of them headed for the next corner. Their legs began to slow as they rounded one more. Aoko rubbed her back as she tried to catch her breath. Though Aoko had insisted that she was fine, it appeared to have been bravado. Even the usually clueless Sojiro felt the desperation they were in. He stood behind Aoko with his arms folded. While they had a moment, he tried to make sense of everything. First, Aoko had nearly killed him. Though he was saved at the last possible second, it was by the strange stretchy woman Aoko had burned to ashes 2 nights prior. He could barely make it out that night, but he considered it a her because it looked female. The woman's attack wounded Aoko's back and forced her to flee. Aoko had taken Sojiro with her, claiming that the reason she did so was to prevent her prey from escaping. In other words, she's gonna kill him now.
青崎はまだ諦めてないんだな。
当たり前よ。あんなやつ、仮に2体と半分始末しても、あんた用の余力は残せるわ。
Her tone was sharp, but even Sojiro could see that she was struggling to stay confident. The damage to her body was too much to afford her any optimism. Still, the fear in her eyes refused to accept her circumstances.
中がところどころショートしてる。あの右腕は回路を混戦させるジャミングってわけね。
Though the proper response would have been for her to tremble in fear, she did nothing but shake her fist in anger. The disruption of formulae was only supposed to work on absolute beginners. If it had been her roommate, the arm would have been repelled the instant it hit her, and the attacker's circuits burned out rather than her own. Attempting to establish a link to the magic circuits of another mage was like presenting your heart on a silver platter. It would be of no use in a battle against the superior mage. And yet, her adversary had been designed to do just that. Or maybe Aoko is just a bad mage. Just some food for thought. Coupled with the attacks on areas of Misaki under Aoko's jurisdiction these last few weeks, it was clear a statement from the enemy who had revealed itself as the fellow mage 2 days ago. In other words, the puppet saw Aoko as no threat at all.
敵ながら正確な判断だこと。
While she was still angry, the whirlwind of emotions within her started to fade. Her face was that of a hunter far beyond her years.
なんか俺の時より真剣だな。
まあね、あんたの時は遊びが入ってたし。
Damn. Sojiro was not sure whether to be happy or sad at that.
わからないことだらけで何を聞いていいかわからないんだけど、一つだけいいか。
Aoko didn't respond. Her eyes were focused on the darkness before them. The silence was heavy, and the darkness was like a noose closing in on them. But Sojiro continued in spite of her indifference.
青崎はあいつも殺すのか。
A stillness fell over them. It was as if the gloom was pulling them in. No response. Their breathing was the only sound echoing in the dim corridor. There stood Sojiro, forcing her to confront her sins and the magician girl who continued to ignore him. They spent a few seconds, seemingly frozen in time.
そう。それがあなたのキーワードみたいね。
This would be such a good time to drop the line. I really hope he tells her that people die when they're killed. Her sigh was tinged with both resignation and contempt.
何？
独り言よ、忘れて。それと言っとくけど、あいつは人間じゃないわ。信じられないだろうけど、自分の意志で動く人形なの。この前のも今のやつもね。
Sojiro nodded as he processed the information. Not only did he doubt her story, but he seemed to have accepted it at face value.
なんか落ち着いてるわね、あなた。
まさかもう何が何だかわからないからあまり考えないことにしてるだけだ。ただ人形に関しては別にどうということはない。
もしかして他でも自動人形を見たことあるとか？
ん？都会の人形ってああいうものじゃないのか？
ね。
She barely stopped herself from falling to her knees. W rage bait. Of course, how could she have forgotten? She was dealing with a bona fide, natural-born moron. As a student who transferred from the isolation of the mountains like an endangered species, his utter lack of common sense rendered anything miraculous as mundane. If automobiles were moving hunks of metal, the moving puppets were nothing to write home about. That is true. Wait, that meant... To him, the incident from the other night hadn't been extraordinary at all. He might have even assumed it was an everyday occurrence in the city.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんとここまで来ると感心するわ。調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とかお化けとかさ。でもあなたにとってはそういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。なんかバカみたいね、私。
Her strained face returned to normal for a moment. It hit her. There had been another way to handle this without anyone getting hurt. But the damage had already been done. There were no do-overs in life, nor should there be. Her own mistaken assumptions had sent the situation spiraling out of control. But now that Sojiro was involved, she had to make sure that her secret was safe with him. Even if there had been another better option, that ship had sailed. Human relationships were ultimately driven by mutual understandings. So she doesn't care about killing him now because that situation meant nothing to him, basically. Because his interpretation was that murder was just common in cities, right? There's no need to kill him because he's a dumbass. Break time was over. There stood Aoko Aozaki and Sojiro Shizuki. I don't think you understood Aoko there. What?
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんと調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とかお化けとかさ。でもあなたにとってはそういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。なんかバカみたいね、私。
Wait, what did I not understand?
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいって調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とかお化けとかさ。でもあなたにとってはそういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。なんかバカみたいね、私。
She's starting to feel like the real moron. It hit her. There had been another way to handle this without anyone getting hurt. Wait, I don't get it. I feel like my interpretation's pretty correct. No.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんとここまで来ると感心するわ。
There's no point going through that much effort to kill someone who didn't really think anything of the situation that he saw, right? No, he did think something of the situation because he was making a big deal about it to Tobimaru. So, wait, what?
調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とかお化けとかさ。でもあなたにとってはそういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。
No wonder you're such a weirdo. Normally people wouldn't react the way when I attacked you. I could have been a monster or a ghost, but for you, it was just another new fact to life. It was just another new fact to life.
なんかバカみたいね、私。
I'm getting rage baited.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんとここまで来ると感心するわ。調子が狂うのもと。
His utter lack of common sense rendered anything miraculous as mundane. Yeah, so he thought that night he saw in the park was just a mundane thing. But he still... If automobiles were moving hunks of metal, Yes, I already. Okay, so I feel like I'm just getting baited. Like I don't get what I'm misunderstanding about this dialogue.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんとここまで来ると感心するわ。調子が狂うのも当然だ。化け物とかお化けとかさ。でもあなたにとってはそういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。
I think I first need to understand why it's such a big deal if they get caught being a mage. Cause why is it so bad if someone finds out? I don't think they ever mentioned why. First rule. Yeah, but why is that the first rule?
なんかバカみたいね、私。
I don't know. But like, I still don't get what I'm misunderstanding here. Like, Sojiro thinks that's just a regular common occurrence in the city, and like he wouldn't think much of it. So like, there'd be no reason for him to report it to anyone. So like, there's no reason for Aoko to freak out about it, because he wouldn't do anything with that information unless he unintentionally leaked it. Yeah, but she still has to kill him now because she already tried. What? There had it. But look, it says here there had been another way to handle this without anyone getting hurt. If he still has to die, then someone's still getting hurt. I don't get it. But now that Sojiro was evolved, she had to make sure that her secret was safe with him. So yeah, she's not trying to kill him anymore. What do you mean still has to kill him? Now she's just gonna make sure that it's safe. Even if there had been another better option, that ship had sailed. Break time was over. There stood Aoko Aozaki and Sojiro Shizuki. Their first ever idle conversation had come to an end, not that they had a choice in the matter. It was the jarring murmuring from around the corner that cut it short.
Nobody
Nobody remembers my favorite. The enemy was just around the corner, visible in the mirrors parallel to it.
悠長に話してる場合じゃないわね。とにかく今は距離を。
In contrast to Alko's elegant blues, its lights were a miraculous red.
感動打ち。
There was a momentary flash of light before she even extended her arm. But the instant she saw the enemy, her dormant feelings erupted once more.
さっきから邪魔なのよ。
She channeled all her pent-up anger and shunted it into her right arm. The fog that filled the corridor was no magical weaving, but rather a barrier of raw energy. It was equivalent to setting ablaze 3 buckets of gasoline to create a wall of fire in the hope that it would stop an arrow in flight. If the puppet had attacked with its arm, it could have pierced such a wall easily, but because it had lucid curses with no definite form, the wall energy repelled the attack. Wall was a huge waste of magical energy. It was the only means Alko had to protect herself at that very moment. Unfortunately, its protection was reserved for Alko alone. Sojiro held his hand to his mouth. While the curse had been weakened to the point where Alko could no longer feel it, it had plenty of effect on Sojiro, who was not a mage. As if it understood this fact, the puppet turned its gaze from Alko to the unanticipated human behind her.
こいつは関係ないでしょ。
Enraged, she swung her arm forward once again. The blue light formed a wall to block the gander for a scant few seconds. It was enough of an opening to exploit. Just as Alko was forming the wall, the puppet pointed its right arm at its face. At her
関係
face.
あるみたいだから逃げるぞ。
Before the rocket of death could be fired, Sojiro scooped her up into his arms. Holy Riz. How he mustered the strength to do this was a mystery, but he turned his back on the puppet and took off running. He was a nimble sprinter, resembling a deer leaping across obstacles. Sojiro rounded 2 more corners. Ignored whatever complaints Alko was making, and eventually stopped in the middle of the 2nd floor. He set her down.
よし、ここまで来れば少しは休めるな。
Sojiro's shoulder heaved as he caught his breath. As light as she was, running while carrying someone else would make anyone winded. She looked up at him
こんな体
in
力あったのに
comprehension.
なんで。
It made no sense to her. If he had the stamina to pick her up and run, surely he could have stood up and escaped when he had been downed earlier.
ああ、あの時は諦めてたから。
His words were unfiltered as ever. Though right then, fighting for their lives, he lacked some of his usual absent-mindedness.
諦めてたってどうして？
さあ、忘れた、そんなことは。
He forgot. Though he may have turned away because he regretted saying it out loud, his words spoke volumes. For some reason, it pained Aoko to see him like that.
それより青崎、唐突に気分が悪いんだが。
諦めてた。こんな体力あったのに。
あ
あ。諦めてたってどうして？
さあ、忘れた、そんなことは。
Though he may have turned away because he regretted saying it out loud.
「それより青崎、唐突に気分が悪いんだが、あの赤い光も、その…」
ええ、魔術の類よ。岩洞打ちって言ってね。北欧の呪詛の一つ。魔術回路のある私には効かないけど、抵抗のないあなたには効果てきめんみたいね。
なんだ、青崎には効かないのか。じゃあ、危ないのはあの腕だけだな。
Aoko had no idea why he was relieved, but she gritted her teeth and fought down the urge to snap at him. There was no use in yelling at a time like this. Above all, she felt that it would have been petty in the extreme to voice her annoyance right now.
そうね。注意するのは伸ばしてくる腕だけ。大した相手じゃないわ、やっぱり。
This time, it was not false bravado. Such an enemy would normally be a breeze for Aoko Aozaki. But her shameful negligence had led to the disruption of her magic circuits, making her even less formidable than her enemy. At this point, Aoko had no way of attacking. The only option left to her was to wait for it to expend all of its magical energy, but its perpetual curse mechanism made that a non-starter. This game attack would not end until one of them was dead. She realized that she was in the same position she had cornered Sojiro in earlier. She glanced at her right arm. She could not imagine how she had gotten into such a mess with her magical energy at more than half of its capacity. This had to be karma for having enjoyed toying with Sojiro earlier.
呆れた。いるところにはいるものね、神様って。
She grumbled under her breath as she shifted her focus. She had the fuel for the fire, but not the igniter. And that killing machine would chase her until the end of time if need be. What she should do next was blindingly clear. She had to get back to normal. But how?
青崎、
ごめん、考え事してた。確か。よし、合ってる。しずきくん、そこに横道あるのわかる？
あ？
Aoko pointed, but he could see nothing but the walls of the corridor. For one thing, the floor had nothing but left turns, and Aoko was pointing to the right.
2階は中心まで行くと1階に降りる階段があるんだけど、それは私が壊したから使えないの。けどここの作りも意地が悪くてね。よく見れば右に曲がる通路もあるのよ。上級者だけに分かる抜け道ってやつ。あとは注意して探せば1階の階段までショートカットできる。悪いけど一人で行って。
Aoko turned her back to Sojiro and started walking. Walking in the opposite direction of the escape route and down the long corridor toward the puppet in pursuit.
あいつは無差別だからここで壊さないといけない。魔術師は魔術師同士で争うのはいいんだけど、みだりに一般人に手を出しちゃいけないって決まりがあるの。あいつの目的は私のわけだし、結果がどうあれすっきりするでしょ。
If Aoko won, the puppet would be destroyed. If Aoko lost, its objective would be complete and it would shut down. Either way, them going their separate ways would mean Sojiro survived. This is what Aoko meant.
"あいつは無差別だから、あいつの目的は私のわけだし、結果がどうあれすっきりするでしょ。
It's the best target because she... Though she explained it as if the events were happening to two totally different people.
運が良ければ入り口までたどり着けるわ。それじゃあまた明日ね。
Even Sojiro could tell why she was trying to act. She could tell she was just trying to act off. But she had already disappeared around the corner by the time he thought to stop her.
さて。
Mentally, Aoko bemoaned the disaster she was in. The quality of this puppet was on a completely different level compared to the one that was from the park 2 days ago. An auto-encounting perpetual motion machine was a rarity in and of itself, but this puppet was also equipped for battle with its extending arms and gander projecting crystalline eyes. It was a first-class product that, if you put on the market, would sell for hundreds of millions of yen. Although that was only when factoring in its value as an antique. For the purposes of combat, it would have made more sense to mobilize a significantly less expensive familiar. To use such a precious commodity as a tool for murder marked this puppet's master as a completely different breed of crazy from the enemy she had faced up to
Vivo
now.
insomne, solitare putresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus natibus dies. Theobeum.
来たわね。
Oh, I do not like that. What the fuck? The sound of a crackling music box filled the air. The automata, animated by its own curses, approached. The corridor measured approximately 30 feet in length. Aoko lay wait. Oh my god, what is going on? Holy shit, I cannot breathe.
来たわね。
I think my brain is dying today. The corridor measured approximately 30 feet in length. Aoko lay in wait around the corner, further down the hall, anticipating the puppet's appearance. This was not to buy Sojiro time to escape, far from it. Aoko had concluded that she couldn't make a break for it under the current circumstances. Even if she did try to escape and by some miracle made it out of the House of Mirrors, that was as far as she would go. Outside, with no cover, Aoko would quickly be overtaken and skewered from behind. As long as her magecraft was disabled, escape was impossible. Instead, she chose to force the enemy back. Her situation was not the most favorable, but neither was the puppet's. Though this narrow hall gave Aoko no place to run, it in turn prevented the puppet from reaching its full speed. That was the weak point of this machine. Automata of its era had a tendency to struggle with the minute
Setta.
Automata of its era had a tendency to struggle with minute changes in speed. Jeez. Holy fuck. Oh.
Setta.
She flowed energy into her shorted circuits. Her blood flow and magical energy supply were unstable. It would be difficult to construct a formula in this state. All she could do was harden her right arm by imbuing it with as much energy as she could. Doing so turned her arm into an improvised weapon like a hammer or bat, assuming she could manage to get into close combat range. This was the best she could do. All she needed now was a plan of attack. The question wasn't what weapon to use, but how to use the weapon she had. The simplest way would be to use the mirror's reflection to hide and then rush the puppet from its blind spot, except for one major problem. It did not have a sense of sight in the first place. The puppet's view of the world around it did not stem from visual feedback, but from mapping the topography of its surroundings. In theory, it was the same as a bat's echolocation. The environment could be measured based on the emission and return of high-frequency sound waves. Those chants served as sensory pulses. As far as the puppet was concerned, the mirrors were no better than transparent panes, making even the thought of an ambush intangible.
よりリアルに察知される。本当は遠距離からの狙撃が最適なんだけど、ガンドを撃ってくるならフィンの一撃ぐらい隠してるわよね。
Gander was Scandinavian in origin, and considering its simplicity highly versatile, it was most effective at impairing a target's health by pointing a finger. As a single-action magecraft, it was limited to only causing illness, but there was a secret technique said to be the greatest mastery of the Gander shot. Okay, I swear to God, I feel like I have been reading so much this chapter. Like there has been so much like exposition, I guess, that I've had to read, and like I do not remember reading this much yesterday. Or like narrating, I mean. It could do more than cause simple illness. It was a deadly curse that could stop the heart. The wound on her back set her nerves on fire. An unarmed girl and then a deadly automaton. It was clear that she was the one destined for death. She considered her slim chance of survival when... What? A vision sent chills down her spine. Quietly, using everything she could to clamp down on the feeling, Aoko faced her all too familiar illusion. She clenched her teeth to keep them from making a deafening clatter. But there, the sensation of fingers crawling up her neck behind her, the spectre stared and laughed. This alone made Aoko want to bolt. On top of it all, when Aoko tried to mentally simulate the coming fight, she estimated a 2 in 10 chance of dying in the first 5 seconds. 20%. At times, her predictions were harsher than reality. If Aoko fought the puppet 10 times, she would die twice. She could not stop herself from visualizing her own corpse. She imagined herself collapsing, crumpling under the puppet's curse. Her eyeballs swollen like a blowfish, blood and other fluids oozing from every bodily orifice. 1 in 5, 1 in 5, 1 in 5. A 1 in 10 chance of death was bad enough, but 1 in 5? It drove her crazy. Aoko forced down her heart as it tried to escape from her mouth. Taking in a deep breath, she peered at her own reflection. She thought back to that white night half a year ago. This, she decided, was nothing compared to that. Wait, what happened half a year ago? I forgot. 6 months ago, at the Kuonji estate. The Hound of White Roses, the wander snatch that appeared from within the thick fog, had killed Aoko 100 times out of 10.
Mea anima immortalis, otem mea futura negata sunt. Manes sum, animam definira ambiguum est.
A dark curse shattered Aoko's daydream. It was only 30 feet away. The puppet rounded the corner. Either side stood in the shadows, their forms indistinct. The puppet gave no warning. Without preamble, it swiftly fired the Gander barrage. Just as Aoko planned, the curses fizzled out as they hit her mist-like barrier of magical energy. The protection would only last a few seconds, giving her just enough time to. A stretchable spear sprang toward Aoko's face.
Bingo!
The lethal weapon grazed her cheek. All her experience analyzing puppet attacks patterns gave her the wherewithal to evade the attack by a hair's breadth. It was one thing if a puppeteer were pulling the strings, but autonomous dolls had their limitations. Aoko had bet everything on this killing machine following a predefined template. The puppet would use a given attack for a given range, and she could adjust her tactics to that.
Ikeru! このまま!
Before its arm had the chance to fully retract, she charged the puppet. It was a risky gamble, but her overall chances were slim to begin with. The scales tipped in her favor. If her predictions were correct, there were 2 ways she would die. One was from a fin shot, fired at that range. And the other... What? The other was if the puppet's attack pattern was beyond her ability to foresee. Instantaneous mass transfer. Otherwise known as mass displacement. Immediately after Aoko dodged the puppet's arm, something smashed into her abdomen. What? The other arm. The head-on collision from his shoulder felt like a rocket. I am so confused what's going on in this artwork. Head-on collision. But where had the ability to felt? Oh, God. But where had the ability to propel itself come from? Puppets like this were not built to have the ability to jet around like that. Doing everything in her power to stay conscious in spite of the pain, Aoko could just make out what had happened.
今の推進力じゃなくて牽引力。
It pulled itself towards the other arm. Yeah. Swallowing her surprise, she hastily pulled herself back up. Her abdomen, specifically her diaphragm, had been dealt a significant blow. The attack left her disoriented. Thankfully, the puppet was surprisingly lightweight. Her bones and organs were intact and she had sustained no life-threatening damage. She was having a hard time breathing, however. She was shaken, though she managed to keep her calm. In another 2 seconds, she'd be back on her feet. No, that was 2 seconds too long. She told herself to calm down, that she was already calm. She'd only lost her bearings. She was fine. She could recover her breath and her vision later if only her body would move.
Intellectus non necessarius est, piusque escat. Un nostro rascente abulat fit. Ratio fix tantum est. Dolores nicium cerebrum fit.
Above her, Aoko could hear the warped noise of a powerful force.
足動け。でもどっちに行けば。
She could once more feel the touch of death.
Is salvatio, is salvatio, is salvatio.
The puppet was so close that Aoko could reach out and touch it. That also meant that I could reach out and kill Aoko.
こいつの右腕の死角に入れる。
By intuition alone, Aoko rolled over to the puppet's right flank. Its arm was still embedded within the wall. From here, it could not attack. She had made the right decision, and her dizziness faded.
Intellectus non necessarius est, piusque escat. Un nostro rascente abulat fit. Ratio fix tantum est. Dolores nicium cerebrum fit.
It does look like her. I was right. It was only an instant. Within this labyrinth of mirrors, she saw an image of herself.
Is salvatio.
A blinding, brilliant light flashed. Lacerations appeared across the walls. At the last moment, Aoko managed to thicken the magical energy running through her veins into a primitive form of magecraft resistance. It just barely saved her life from what must have been the puppet's ace in the hole. The puppet bore a striking resemblance to Aoko. This powerful curse was not satisfied with stopping Aoko's heart, but destroying her entire being. Aoko did not even have the time to be shocked. This was her chance for a counterattack. The puppet's balance was unsteady, its right arm still embedded in the wall. Aoko prepared to give its defensive body a strong kick, but her knees buckled and she collapsed into a heap on the floor.
Vego in sum, solitare putresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus natibus dies, Theobeam.
A sudden nausea and lightheadedness overcame Aoko. Her body temperature began to rapidly lower.
しま、こいつ呪いをばらまいてるんだった。
She noticed too late. The puppet's curse encircled the hall. The curse chant that the puppet used as a source of power doubled as a defense mechanism, crippling those who drew near her with illness. She bore the full brunt the entire time she was in close proximity to it. Although Aoko had magic circuits, she was succumbing just as Sojiro had. Languidly, she forced her deteriorating body to jump back. With all the energy she could muster, she forced her way past the exhaustion caused by the curses. However, Aoko's blood pressure took a steep nosedive, not from the curse-induced anemia, but from what appeared in front of her. They stood in perfect harmony. What? In front of Aoko was the automata that shared her face, its left arm held out like an arrow. The deadly weapon shot forward and honed in on her heart. Then, a moment before it made contact.
危ない。
The moment she heard that fearless voice, completely out of place in the storm of violence, Aoko's body was pulled forcefully to one side. Once again, the extending arm cut through empty air. While the puppet quickly retracted its left arm, Sojiro took the brief opportunity to take Aoko by the hand and flee at full speed. Sojiro ran through the corridor as fast as he could, only stopping when he had put enough distance between them and the puppet.
考えてみると
What? Though he had saved her, she looked angry rather than grateful. This did not keep Sojiro from saying his piece.
明日はどうも忙しいみたいなんだ。
In other words, let's finish this today. A rather awkward proposal. Aoko remained silent. She was also rather angry. Not that she could figure out what made him tick. Nor because he'd returned after escaping. Not even because he was spouting his typically airheaded lines. It was, she supposed, that instant. The fact that when he grabbed her hand, her mind had gone completely blank. Aoko found it unforgivable. Which beckoned the response.
あなた、正気？
In the heat of the moment, she blurted out before she could stop herself.
それとも自殺願望でもあったわけ？私もあいつもあんたなんか殺す対象に過ぎないのよ。少なくとも恩を売る相手じゃない。言っとくけど、私助けられたぐらいで曲がる信念は持ち合わせていないから。
Sojiro nodded, clearly unperturbed.
青崎がそんな可愛らしいもんじゃないのはこの夜だけで骨身に染みてるよ。けど君は勘違いをしてるから少し正そう。あいつの狙いは青崎だけじゃない。君だけじゃなく俺も殺す気だと思う。
Why does it want to kill him? She was having none of it. Her eyes shot daggers his way.
話は最後まで聞く。どうしてかっていうと1階の入り口あるだろ、あの細長い通路。なんでかあそこから先に進めないんだ。逃げたくても逃げ出せなくて仕方なく戻ってきた。
Aoko's eyes widened ever so slightly in amazement. She felt admiration rather than shock that her enemy would go to such lengths.
それにさっきので完全に敵扱いされた。あの人形こっちをじろっと睨んできたし、いや一瞬でよく見えなかったけど生きた心地しなかったな。青崎も気をつけた方がいい。多分よっぽど怖い顔をしてい
Because
る
it
に違いない
looks
ぞ。
like the puppet.
それはご親切にどうも。
うん。なんでこれはもう他人事じゃないんだ。青崎と人形、結論としてどっちが勝っても俺は殺されてしまうんじゃないか。
Oh.
そうね。そこまでやってるなら目撃者は消すでしょうね。私みたいに。
If it's willing to go as far as to go off the edge. Wait, so why is she still gonna kill him? Because... Wait, I still don't get that. I still don't get what she meant by there is a way to resolve this without anyone getting hurt. Like, was she gonna take advantage of the fact that he's a dumbass? But like, how? I don't get it. Before she tried to kill him already, yes? Mm-hmm.
だろ？でも俺はあいつには殺されたくない。うん。青崎と人形。
そうね。そこまでやってるなら目撃者は消すでしょうね。私みたいに。
If it's willing to go as far as to seal off the entrance, then they'd probably kill any witnesses as well. At least that's what I do.
だろ？でも俺はあいつには殺されたくない。
His words were decisive. As Aoko looked up at him, she could swear he was trying to encourage her. It was then that she realized. Sojiro was looking even worse than before.
ちょっと待って。大丈夫なのあなた。
まあ醤油を一升瓶飲むよりはマシではないかと。
He tried to make light of the situation, but his forehead was clearly drenched in sweat. Is the curse messing him up too much?
さっき人形に近づいたから。
How could he possibly be able to withstand the curse that even made Aoko nauseous? She bit her lip, annoyed at herself for not noticing this earlier. Sojiro was such an airhead that she hadn't even paused to consider his plight.
下で隠れていようとか思わなかったの？その方がどう考えても安全でしょ？
She really could not understand him at all.
それは青崎が言うセリフじゃないな。でもまあ長話をしている時間もない。そろそろ追いついてくる頃だ。
He turned to look down the corridor. The crackling sounds of a music box could be heard creeping forth from the darkness.
さっき一回似て考えたんだ。君がやられても俺は殺される。ならまず奴をどうにかするべきだ。
あなた、何が言いたいの？
She asked the question to which she already knew the answer. She did it to put him to the test. If we wavered even a little, she would have killed him where he stood. He's gonna use him.
あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら俺のことは見逃してくれる？提案。さっき一回似て考えたんだ。君がや
あなた。
提案。あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら俺のことは見逃してくれる？
助けられたぐらいじゃ信念は曲げないって言ったでしょ。
Okay, so she never planned to spare him because he was a moron. So like, yeah, I still don't get how else she would have killed him. Just taking advantage of the fact that he was a moron.
So それは青崎が考えてくれ。得意だろ、そういうの。
The commander who had the overall picture was responsible for delegating roles to their teammates. It was futile to depend on someone who was unable to grasp the situation or evaluate the enemy's strength. Sojiro was proud to share that he knew this. He spoke the truth. Aoko was the only one who knew both Sojiro and the automata. That was why he pointed out that following her orders to the best of his ability was the only thing he could do. It may have seemed as though Sojiro had surrendered his capacity for self-thought, but in accepting that he was helpless, he was in fact giving Aoko his complete trust. Oh, I thought he was gonna just stand there as bait or something. Okay, yeah, that also works.
私の指示に 100% 従うってこと？
ああ、それにこれは恩とか義理の話じゃない。一人だと分が悪いから二人でかかるだけだ。善意でも好意でもない。取引って言わないか、こういうの。
His eyes sparkled as if this was bartering in its truest form.
まったく。
This child must have learned that from Tobimaru, Aoko thought. Though she refused to let him see it, she smiled inwardly. Sure, he had gotten the best of her just now, but there were times when defeat was not the worst outcome in the world.
労働と報酬ってわけね。それなら理にかなってる。うん。言いたくないけど。
She relaxed her shoulders and sighed. Her face cracked into a wicked grin, as if her fears had suddenly washed away.
それ、結構私の好みよ。
Aoko repaid Sojiro's trust in equal measure.
結構きついかもね。あなたの役目。
How was she gonna abuse him? Aoko warned that Sojiro moving as fast as she could without her footfalls causing a din of noise. Sojiro remained near the center of the spiral maze on the second floor.
実を言うと、もう一つ用意しておいた仕掛けがあるの。自分でもやりすぎだって呆れたもんだけど、あなたがここに来るのが遅かったから、ちょっと興に乗っちゃって。
お？仕掛けって俺用の？
Sojiro tilted his head like a squirrel as Aoko freely discussed the final ace up her sleeve. Whoa.
地下の柱に着火型のちょっとした魔術式を刻んでおいたの。中心の柱に点火することで連鎖的に他の柱に仕掛けた魔術も起動する。ジャミングを食らう前に作ったものだから、直接魔力を叩き込めば一気にこういくわ。
うん。
Sojiro was a little unsettled by how clear that last bit was.
青崎、こうじゃわからない。できるだけ明確にどこまで爆破する気だったのか白状してくれ。あと、もしかして俺早まったか？
いや、その単なる保険っていうか、追いかけっこの途中であんたを見失ったら、いっそ建物ごと爆破しちゃおうかなって。
Wouldn't she have to be at the pillar to ignite it though, so she would kill herself as well? It was her policy to be thorough to a fault after all. She laughed, embarrassed to hear herself say that out loud. Faced with Aoko's cruelty, Sojiro forgot about the situation at hand and protested from the bottom of his heart.
何よ、いいじゃない。そのおかげでなんとかなりそうなんだから。
She shot back. Aoko dashed down the corridor, mumbling things that probably would have sent Sojiro packing if he heard them. The strategy was simple. Aoko would use the escape route to the right and avoid the puppet while making her way down to the basement. Upon reaching the central pillar, she would infuse the... Wait. Aoko would use the escape route to the right and avoid the puppet while making her way down to the basement. Upon reaching the central pillar, she would infuse the formula she had prepared with magical energy and escape. Escape to where? Once ignited, it would take about a minute for the chain reaction to spread throughout the whole house of mirrors, and another minute for the building to collapse. She would be cutting it a little close, but because she had committed the maze to memory, she was sure she could make it out in time. Aoko assumed that the chain reaction caused by the pillar would clear the barrier that the puppet had placed at the entrance. And even if it was strong enough to withstand the blast, it would not be able to stay standing once the foundation buckled. Sojiro's escape was assured as long as the formula in the basement was activated. Next came the most important part. The automaton was at a disadvantage in the obstacle-laden house of mirrors and was unable to move at full speed. If it was near the center of the second floor where the buildings collapsed, it would be caught up and crushed by it. So the problem was keeping the puppet on the second floor until Aoko could make it down to the basement. So he's gonna be the bait.
当てにしたからね、しずきくん。せめて3分ぐらいは引きつけて。
Ideally, he would be able to keep it busy until she could activate the formula. If that failed to work, him luring it down to the first floor would be the next best thing. She understood perfectly well the danger she was putting Sojiro in, but his lucky streak and running speed were nothing to scoff at.
ただ逃げるだけなら、もしかしてとんでもないことをしてくれるかも、あいつ。
Aoko made her way through the hidden passage of the maze, her hopes pinned on Sojiro. Meanwhile... While out of earshot, Sojiro was readying himself for another desperate chase. He calmed his beating heart using a method of his own making. What mattered most was that he remained calm. The plan was simple enough. And Aoko's orders were succinct enough and easy to
10 メー
understand.
トルぐらいの距離を保って、できるだけゆっくり通路を3、4周すること。横道は鏡のつなぎ目で覚えて。ここなら左回りで6、3、7、2枚目にあるから、そこをぐるぐる回ってれば比較的安全よ。
Can he really memorize all of that? It was essentially a looping marathon. As long as Sojiro kept just enough distance from the puppet's extended arm to allow her to track him, she could continue to chase him indefinitely. Simple though the task was, Sojiro was putting his life on the line as bait. And then there was the final order to run as fast as he could to the exit when the building began to sway.
結構じゃなくてかなりきついんじゃないかな、これは。
He nervously stuck his head out from around the corner. He could hear the sound of the music box from the other side of the corridor. Fuck. First, he had to make eye contact with it, then head through the shortcut on the right and began their game of tag. He spotted it and braced himself. Closer, closer. Fearing that that her arm could fly at him at any moment, he went over Aoko's instructions in his head.
あれ
He forgot. What? I knew it. This guy's a moron. He could not quite remember which pane led to the first hidden passage. The third, the sixth, the ninth. No. He was sure that was mistaken. He was confident that he had memorized it moments ago, but his nerves had gotten to the best of him, and his head was now spinning. Then Sojiro realized that the sound of his pursuer was beginning to grow distant. What? And at an incredible speed. Is he going for... Oh, what the hell?
何
The unusual silhouette of the puppet astonished him. Before it had taken the form of a beautiful girl, but now it made a bizarre transformation, and returned to the first floor to pursue her primary target. This puppet's too smart.
いやそれは
Sojiro was no longer sure what to do. Before he had even taken time to mourn his failure, the puppet had vanished out of sight. I'll help, so let me go. Or so he had said, but now he could not follow through.
さて自分はこれからどうしよ
Alone, he tilted his head in frustration. He spoke into the darkness as if Aoko would be there to answer him. Meanwhile, downstairs, as soon as she arrived on the first floor, Aoko understood what had transpired above her. She did not even have to strain her ears to hear the puppet. Even during its heyday, this attraction had never made sounds like the ones she heard coming from towards her now. It was the sound of despair, as if a horde of monstrous hedgehogs were scraping their way past the mirrors in her direction.
ドジ3分どころか10秒持たないってどういうことよ。
Rather than buying her time, Sojiro had instead stolen hers. He had one job, to run away. That was all. She cursed him under her breath.
複数の足音ってことは二足から多脚に切り替えたのね。
The echoes made it sound like dozens of feet were approaching. Aoko's mind conjured an image of a giant six-legged spider tearing its way down the corridor. It was little wonder that it was so much faster than before. Its perception of its surroundings through echolocation was of particular use in the dark. Compared to sight-dependent humans, this automaton was far better equipped to navigate its way through the labyrinth of mirrors. If it could not keep pace earlier, that had been because its bipedal mode had made it less maneuverable. Now, the stability provided by multiple legs gave it a speed that far exceeded that of any human.
どうするどうするどうする。
Her thoughts spun out as she tried to come up with Plan B. All she knew for sure was that this was a pivotal moment. If she continued standing still, she had seconds left at most. Even in her current state, she knew she could easily neutralize the bounded field blocking the entrance without casting a spell. All she had to do was feed a little of her energy into it. Aoko could sprint with all her might for a little more than 3 minutes. The puppet had far more stamina than she did. She could only come up with 3 options. The first was to escape through the exit in front of her. The second was to hide somewhere on the more complicated first floor. And the third was to run into the basement and be stuck like a rat in the trap.
なんだ、考えるまでもない。
She made her decision with zero hesitation. Moving her stiff legs again with determined strength. The oncoming storm was almost upon her. Her resolve firm, she turned and ran, descending into the darkness. No matter what, a finale should be glorious. This would be the Mirror Castle's final scene. 2 humans and a puppet. A young sorceress ran toward the subterranean part of the castle, while an autonomous antique chased its prey into the depths of a demonic dungeon. A minute later, a faint blue charge would ripple through the castle. This was the main pillar in the deepest depths of the basement. Though not critical to the castle structure, the pillar was a visible symbol of it. The girl concentrated her magical energy into a fist and thrust it into the pillar. Oh my god. This was the blow that would bring down the castle. She imagined the destruction as she threw the punch, and that scene blossomed into reality seconds later. It was simple ignition magecraft, meant to release the condensed magical energy engraved into the core pillars at the corners of the structure. Using electricity as a switch meant virtually instantaneous activation. This guy's just been standing here. It happened swiftly and elegantly. A hammer of destruction descended upon the castle of dreams that had suddenly resisted its fate for 2 years. It was almost a joyous sound. And so, the lifeless and abandoned castle of mirrors set the stage for his final, and most spectacular performance. Aoko's magical energy became an electrical charge that activated the magecraft formula engraved into the pillar. The chain reaction would lead to the castle's destruction.
ご苦労様。でも、思ってたよりくたびれてたのね。これじゃあ1分持つかどうか。
Aoko tried to steady her breathing while rotating her magic crest at full speed. She wreathed her arms in blue light, fully aware that she could no longer activate another formula. Her labored breathing refused to settle. She stood at the center of the basement. So what I don't get is, like, if she gets a chance to get out the explosion, wouldn't the puppet get a chance too easily as well? Without being spotted even once, she managed to make it all the way to the center pillar. It was a 100-meter dash in 13 seconds flat, undoubtedly a new personal best. She spurred on her weakened heart, knowing full well that the fate awaited her.
入れば追ってくる。地下に行けば逃げられない。当然よね。最後まで逃げ回ろうなんて虫のいい話だった。
Hindsight was 2020. The castle was only a minute away from collapsing completely. If they stayed here, they would both be crushed by the rubble. The puppet certainly did not care. With no life of its own, its sole concern was the elimination of its target, Aoko Aozaki. Indeed. No life of its own. She resented her own lack of resolve. It wasn't like her to tuck tail and run from an opponent that didn't fear death.
Vivo insum, solitare putoresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies. Teobeam.
そもそも自爆覚悟じゃないあれ。六足歩行とフィンの一撃は使いすぎよ。もう呪詛による魔力補給じゃ間に合わない。
Doesn't have enough. Such a perpetual motion device was only as good as its ability to regulate its energy consumption. Using so many functions at once meant it was burning through fuel quickly and losing the ability to process curses that powered it. Oh, so it's gonna get stuck. It was using up all of its functions that had been given to achieve its aim. This was the pride of a tool, if such things could have ego. Those endowed with sentience could never hope to understand. A beast born to do nothing but run would burn any human who faced its resolve.
ほんと、もったいない。こういう無茶をするのは姉貴だけかと思ってたけど、いるところにはいるもんね。
But Aoko did not intend to sacrifice play here. She respected her adversary now, and she was done regretting her choices. There is no time to waste.
行くわよ。ここできっかり。
Aoko had every intention of paying it back double for what it had done to her. The energy Aoko had accumulated exploded out of her right leg. She aimed for a single high thing, a head-on attack. The enemy responded with a lethal curse that reached for her heart like a set of talons. Humming with power, it's meant to rend Aoko's heart and burn itself out in the process. As soon as she saw it, Aoko kicked the floor as hard as she could. Her long hair swirled through the air as she flipped aside. This lateral move almost sent her tumbling to the ground, but a quick swing of her arm allowed her to regain her balance. A shot grazed her arm. The curse was scorching her left shoulder. She did not flinch. Aoko knew she could not hold as long as she continued to avoid a direct fin shot.
Snap!
Off balance and in pain, it took her half a second to recover. The moment she raised her head, she deflected the attack with a fistful of magical energy.
せーの
If the puppet had a will of its own, its eyes would have popped right out of its sockets. It would have been floored. Shocked at the strong will that allowed this girl to perform a series of movements like this. Aoko's response was instantaneous. While her power was not sufficient to completely redirect the arm's trajectories, it was just enough to deflect it harmlessly past her hair.
Initio eraberamos ton bibimus dolores sunt. Nemo adiuvat, nemo adiuvat, nemo adiuvat.
The chant became a curse that robbed Aoko of her vitality. Did it still have something left in the tank, or was it actually indignant? Whatever the reason, Aoko was easily able to resist its weakened defensive maneuver. Dr. Hua, sending a Hydra or something in my chat.
Initio eraberamos ton bibimus.
And her right leg, pulsing with magical energy, shot up into the puppet's chest from below. It was much lighter than Aoko had anticipated. Or rather, she felt little resistance. An automaton's weight was determined by its internals, the size of its power source. Ironically, it was the superiority of its music box engine that would prove to be its downfall.
Venite, venite, venite. Meum sepulchrum, venite.
We did it. It only took 3 hours. Having taken the brunt of Aoko's kick, the puppet bounced from ceiling to floor, collapsing in a heap. Its internal construction. Oh my fucking god!
恨むなら
I
設
need
計
to
者
go
を
back.
恨みなさい
Venite, venite, venite.
Having taken the brunt of Aoko's fist, the puppet bounced from ceiling to floor, collapsing in a heap. Its internal construction had been warped by the impact, leaving the drum of the music box that powered the puppet warped as well.
恨むなら設計者を恨みなさいダイナモの一つでも積んでいればもうちょっとは重たくなったでしょう
Oh my god. Part of the ceiling came crashing down in front of Alko, snapping her back to her senses.
ところで今どうやってぶっ倒したんだろう。
Wait, so there is no point to explode the building. She was still in... Oh.
こっちのがやばかった。
There's no time to relish in her victory or pity her opponent. Not unless she wanted to meet the same fate. As the situation stood, she found it hard to imagine getting out alive.
急げ、ダッシュだ私。
She clapped herself on the cheeks to motivate herself anew. This was her bounty for finishing their battle in a matter of seconds. Her breath ragged with excitement, Alko ran for the exit. The collapse was intensifying by the second. Having lost its support pillars, the castle was buckling under its own weight.
この邪魔。
Escaping from the basement was proving to be no easy task. While she was taking the shortest route possible through the maze, she was nearly crushed by a falling piece of the ceiling along the way. This was the second time, no, third, she had to deal with the fallen rubble along the way. She destroyed the debris on the stairs with magic bullets as she ran. The automaton's jamming had long since worn off. The earlier attack had damaged the vast majority of its functions. Aoko's breathing was heavy as she ran. Desperation sparked her brain into overdrive. The ceiling seemed to be collapsing in slow motion. Life seemed to flash before her very eyes. Each second stretched into 5. Her frayed nerves made it hard to tell the time. There is debris riddled throughout the stairway, forcing her to crawl up it. She emerged from the destroyed basement into the collapsing first floor. That the plaza was still traversable at all was a miracle in itself, and unfortunately for her, the crucial path to the exit was still intact.
よし、ついてる。
The corridor to the entrance was still intact. The basement maze only extended as far as the plaza, so the entrance to corridor wouldn't collapse. Only the ceiling would cave in, leaving the scaffolding surrounding intact. She got herself this far by telling herself repeatedly that fate would... Fate? Fate reference! Her gamble paid off. It was her lucky day. All she had to do was muster the last of her strength and keep moving forward until... She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Was it naivety? A sense of responsibility? She pushed aside the image that popped into her head and continued running down the corridor. She thinking about if Sojiro made it?
時間合わせの余裕はないわよ。
Yeah, she probably
そんな
thought
上等な作
she
戦じゃな
probably
いし、
thinks he
お
failed
互
or
い
something.
できることをやったら最速で出口に向かいましょう。
That was 5 minutes ago. At the time, Sojiro had nodded with trepidation, and Aoko had not bothered to ask herself why.
何様だったの私。今は走ることだけ考えろ。
This corridor was giving out too. If she were to look back, she was sure she would see the building collapsing in on her. She was also sure that she had no time to waste doing so. Her luck was fading as fast as the building's structural integrity. It was a small miracle that she had escaped a serious injury up to this point, and she could not afford even the slightest slip-up. An ankle sprain, loss of balance, or even a sneeze would be fatal. A simple pat on the back was enough to end it. So naturally, what? Uh-oh.
Huh?
I thought she smashed it. There, it was clear. There it was, clear as day. From the detritus of the stairway, death had arisen to take her down with it. A corpse that had crawled its way back up from the depths of hell itself. It was still operational. And it was still armed with curses. How is it not out of energy yet? I don't know. It had crawled after her, watching as Aoko desperately tried to save herself. The puppet's arm shot forward. While Aoko did not turn to meet it, she could see its reflection in the mirrors.
E salvatio, e salvatio, e salvatio, e salvatio.
Extend, extend, extend. This time she could not dodge it. There was absolutely nothing she could do. The puppet with her face saying,
Venit domum meum. Lut seme somnium. Et pulvere simile quotidiano. Cor prego, te judico.
For a moment, she could not believe her eyes. It was the last thing she expected to see.
しつこいぞお前。
The aura farmer. A fierce expression adorned the face of the boy who had been waiting in the plaza as he smashed the puppet's outstretched arm. Anger really did not suit him at all. His weapon of choice was the fire extinguisher. He must have searched the maze for something to use as a weapon. No, never mind that. It was too crazy to contemplate, but had he stayed behind for her? Yeah, cause he's a simp. Aoko stopped the feet she had sworn she would never stop moving. She had sworn would never stop moving, and extended a hand out to him.
そんなのほっといていいから早く。
Sojiro tossed the fire extinguisher aside and took off running. pieces of the ceiling continued to collapse like dominoes. They kept moving with dust and dirt following in their wake. Their shadows raced through the collapsing corridor with all their strength. The castle was in the throes of death. With a massive crash and a cloud of dust, the final chapter of the fairy tale that had been Kittyland came to an abrupt end. This duel to the death was over. For a moment, amidst their swirling emotions, any past enmity was forgotten. The two collapsed on the lawn and baked in strange solidarity. The ringing in their ears subsided before long. A tremor of such magnitude seemed impossible in an amusement park like this. As the sounds of destruction echoed across the park, Aoko addressed the individual at her side.
ねえ、生きてる？
うん。
チェ。
While the click of her tongue was adorable, the meaning behind it was anything but.
青崎、あいつどうなった？
見ての通りよ。今頃バラバラ死体になってるんじゃない？
Sojiro sighed, not wholly relieved by her frank response. His reason.
でも、そんな心配より自分の心配をした方がいいと思うわよ。
But the deal. His proposal. He wasn't out of the woods yet, after all.
青崎、子供の頃はいじめっ子だっただろ。
Dang.
可逆趣味はないって自負してるけど。それで、今の自分の立場、分かってる？
Why doesn't he just become a mage then? She sat up and smiled. Sojiro hung his head in shame, wondering why her kind tone and expression were so chilling.
面目次第もございません。
かしこまってもダメよ。あの提案には大前提があったわよね。これは取引だって。あなたが役に立つのなら見逃してあげるっていう。
分かってる。だから面目ないって言ってるだろ。
But he did help. He broke the arm at the end. Sojiro made a show of avoiding her eyes, like a pouting child. Aoko was taken back by the sulky display. Perhaps. He was angry at himself rather than her. He was not mad because she would not let him go. He was mad that he had not done his part. Aoko sighed for what seemed like the millionth time that day. She could not figure out what surprised her more, his unconditional kindness or her naive approval of it.
じゃあ、覚悟はできてるの？
そんなのはできないけど、約束だからな。結局は何もしていないし。
It was certainly the case that he failed to do any of the things she had expected of him. But just then, she glanced back at the collapsed Casimir's. What had he done after failing so spectacularly? He had searched for the extinguisher so he could use it as a weapon, and waited patiently in the plaza as the maze collapsed all around him just because he thought it was wrong to leave her behind. It was a foolish choice, and the exact opposite of her choice to run towards the exit without hesitation.
ま、それでよしとするか。
She was satisfied, even as she was shocked at how naive she was being. It was true that he saved her. She smiled inwardly, admiring, if only for a moment, the bravery he continued to show in the face of such extreme circumstances.
役割は果たさなかったけど、アフターケアは合格だし、約束は守らなくちゃね。
With a nod, she pulled herself to her feet. But rule 1 of the association.
約束は、ま、いつか守ってもらうとして。結果はどうあれ手助け特別サービスってことで。結果はどうあれ手助けしてもらったし、結果はどうあれ約束は結果はどうあれ特別サービスってことで、今夜はもう手を出さないであげる。
She bashfully averted her gaze. Though her profile appeared different than it had in the past, it was clearly still the face of a vibrant girl he met the day he first arrived in town.
何？
As if she had felt his eyes on her, she shot him a frowning glare.
いや、突拍子もないけど、青崎は律儀だなって。
He took her outstretched hand. Feeling his way as she pulled him up, she could not help but think that he was about the last person she wanted to hear that from.
ところで、今夜はって言うけど、明日からは
True.
さあ、ま、その時になったら考えるわ。
She shrugged her shoulders as if she was not sure herself. The response was so unlike her that it made Sojiro smile. Was it the solidarity of having escaped death together, or their fleeting camaraderie that made him do so? It might have been for this night only, but the air between them was kind and gentle. A lot had transpired, but the midwinter nightmare had come to an end. The pair had overcome many trials and tribulations and could now leave the mirror realm in their wake. But before that,
随分と身勝手ね。
was she watching that entire time?
それはあなた一人で決めていいことだったかしら、青子。
It was the voice of a beautiful songbird and a merciless machine all rolled into one.
アリス。
Her voice quivered as she spoke the name. The lady in black made her presence known. The night was not over yet. Oh. Her name was Alice Kuonji. She was a witch whose name struck fear into the heart of Aoko, an avatar of the night who would allow no witnesses. did it. Holy fuck. Jesus. I am so tired. I'm tired just like the characters after that fight. I'm so immersed. Oh god. I did not think that chapter was gonna be that long. It is bedtime. That chapter definitely did a lot though. I feel like the plot is finally set in motion now. It did a lot to develop Shizuki and Aoko's relationship. It actually made, like, now I'm finally intrigued about the story. Like why is the puppet following them? Why is it targeting them? Why, like, who designed the puppets? Yeah. I feel like there's something else I was gonna mention about what that chapter did, but I don't know, I'm too tired. I forgot, I need to go to bed. Yeah, I think I might take tomorrow off though. Like, I mean, we've done, like, what? First day was 4 hours, second was 6 hours. I mean, 9 hours already in 3 days. Like, that chapter actually just killed my voice. I think my voice is going to, like, die if I keep doing these streams. Yeah, I think I need to take tomorrow off. Yeah, I'm cooked. There is so much I had to narrate this chapter because of the fighting. Yeah, Jesus. Alright, bedtime. Definitely taking tomorrow off. New Genshin Quest is out. I want to play that. So, yeah.